So let's start this off by talking about Nicki Minaj. For a while now, she's been completely quiet. No appearances on Station Head, no late-night Twitter spaces, not even an Instagram Live. She's just been gone, and fans have been left wondering what's really happening. Now, when someone like Nicki disappears like that, people are going to start speculating. Some were convinced she must be pregnant, while others thought maybe she's just locked away in the studio, working on something big. And honestly, just when it felt like nothing was coming anytime soon, she shook everyone up in the most Nicki way possible. Out of nowhere, she jumps back in by posting on her Instagram stories. It wasn't even a full announcement, it was a small clip, a mini video of her garden. And in that video, she added a short caption. She wrote, "Happy Rowana." That was it. Simple. But with Nicki, even the smallest post makes people start reading between the lines. Fans instantly began debating. Was this her way of saying the hiatus is finally over? Or was there something more behind it? But Nicki knew exactly what she was doing. That wasn't just a random post. A little later, she dropped something that had the internet in shock. She put up another post, this time with a number, 32726. Now, if you didn't catch it, that's 27 March 2026. The second that hit her page, the entire fan base exploded. And listen, I'm not exaggerating. Within less than an hour, her comment section had already hit 6,300 comments. The Barbs were losing their minds. Excitement everywhere. They've been begging for new music, waiting, and now it finally feels like the moment is coming. Honestly, I can't even lie. I'm just as hyped as they are. Nicki doesn't just give us music. She gives us tracks that we keep coming back to for years. Every song has layers, every lyric sparks discussion, and even after 2 or 3 years, people are still decoding her lines, still finding fresh meaning. That's what makes her music special. It has substance. It lasts. You know what I've always loved about Nicki's music? The fact that you can sit down and not even pay attention to the beat or the instrumental, but just focus on her words and still be blown away. That's what hooked me into rap from the very beginning. For me, it has always been about the lyricism, the storytelling, the raw poetry behind it. And because I've always been a huge fan of poetry outside of music, it makes sense that I connect so strongly with Nicki's pen. That's why this album has me counting down the days. I truly cannot wait. Now, while the Barbs are on cloud 9 with this announcement, there's another group of fans who aren't too thrilled. Advocate BBL's supporters feel some type of way about Nicki's return. They've been running with the narrative that Nicki is jealous or even scared. And let's be real, that kind of talk always pops up when she makes a move. But if you've been paying attention on Twitter, you already know that the date Nicki announced wasn't exactly a shocker. That release window has been floating around for a while. Multiple leak pages have been dropping the same thing, tweets showing that March 2026 was already out there before she even confirmed it. So it's like, were they really surprised, or are they just trying to stir drama? And honestly, I want to hear from you in the comments. Are you hyped for this album? Do you think Nicki even cares what Advocate BBL does at this point? Because if you ask me, the energy feels off. Something behind the scenes definitely seems a little shady. At this stage, I've reached a point where I'm like, what's the point of stressing about it? If someone wants to sit comfortably in their little bubble, pretending like everything they achieved was fair and square, then fine. Let them have that illusion. Because truthfully, what's the point of competing when you already know the game is rigged? What's the point of calling it out if the same tricks are just going to keep happening? So I say let them keep playing their games. We've seen it before, they pulled the same stunts with Bongoing. But at the end of the day, numbers don't lie. When that tour starts, when the real audience turnout is there, that's when we'll see the honest picture of where an artist actually stands. And speaking of numbers, let's get into the latest talk surrounding Advocate BBL's album. Now this is interesting, because the early industry predictions had the project debuting somewhere between 125 to 140,000 units. At first, people were quoting 140, but then it shifted closer to 125. And now, out of nowhere, these new predictions are rolling in, this time saying the album is expected to clear over 200K. Now here's the thing. A lot of us keep an eye on these prediction pages, and they're usually on point. It's not like they're just waking up one morning and pulling numbers out of thin air. These are based on industry tracking, real patterns, and data. So when they suddenly bump the album from a 125-140K range to 200K plus, that's not just a small adjustment. That's a jump of over 50,000 units. Some are even saying the increase is closer to 80,000. And honestly, I wasn't shocked when I saw that. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. The same cycle always plays out. Low predictions early on, then right before release, the numbers magically skyrocket. But here's the part that I personally can't wrap my head around. If you're sitting at home and you know deep down those numbers aren't truly organic, how do you celebrate that? What's the satisfaction in bragging about stats when you know they don't reflect real demand? Is it just about hopping online, flexing fake milestones, and feeding your fan base illusions? Because anybody looking at the bigger picture can see there isn't genuine excitement for this album. The demand just isn't there. And look, if the label and Advocate BBL are comfortable playing that game, then fine. It is what it is. But here's the truth. Tours will always expose the reality. You can pump up first-week numbers, you can inflate charts, but when those tickets don't sell and the arenas aren't full, the story tells itself. Eventually, the label is going to feel it in the one place they can't fake, their pockets. When they can't recoup the massive investment they've poured into propping up these numbers, that's when reality hits. That's when Atlantic Records is forced to face the fact that this strategy is a losing battle. Because sure, you can manipulate figures on paper, you can make it look nice for a moment, but at the end of the day, the financial losses always expose the truth. So for the BS fans out there who are currently crashing out on Twitter, screaming, "Oh my God, how could they?" Let's be real, it's already a lost cause. Even if Billboard decides to play their games, these are the same people who once stripped 100K sales away from Nicki Minaj. So believe me when I say, they know exactly what they're doing. These manipulations aren't accidents, they're calculated moves. And at this point, if they want to keep being fraudulent, let them. Let them run with the numbers, let them play these little tricks. Because here's the reality. Even if you put up a front online, eventually, the truth shows itself. The fans might argue day and night, but in the long run, it's the financial side that reveals who's really winning. Their pockets will always tell the real story. And honestly, with the way she's been moving lately, even brand endorsements could start slipping away. Companies usually look at how an artist carries themselves, and during that heated back and forth with JT, the way she argued, the logic, the reasoning, it just wasn't making sense. Some things you just can't say in public if you want to be taken seriously. That kind of energy doesn't exactly attract sponsors, but we'll get into that drama in just a moment. Right now, I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Billboard is intentionally trying to block Nicki Minaj from breaking certain records? Or do you feel like it's just part of the usual industry politics? Drop your thoughts below because I know the fan base has strong opinions on this one. Now, moving forward, before we circle back to the whole Advocate BBL situation and the ongoing mess around those dates, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's take a moment to talk about Doja. So let's talk about Doja for a second, because recently she dropped some alternative covers for her album. And as soon as they went public, the internet had opinions. Lots of them. A section of fans weren't feeling one of the covers at all. In fact, they started dragging her, questioning the entire rollout, saying it wasn't flashy or dramatic enough, and I'm just sitting here thinking, why does a rollout have to look like a circus in the first place? Sure, every artist has their own strategy, but it feels like people are expecting Doja to copy the kind of over-the-top antics we've seen from others. The problem with that is, a lot of the time, those exaggerated rollouts aren't creativity. They're desperation. Doja doesn't strike me as that kind of artist. She's not someone who's going to chase fake drama or stage relationships just to get attention. That's not her lane. If her album leans pop, if the songs are strong, the numbers will speak for themselves. Quality music sells without all that noise. And I think it's really unfair how some people equate a successful rollout with stereotypes, especially pushing this caricature image of a black woman acting out just for entertainment. That's not artistry, that's exploitation. You don't have to throw away your dignity to push records. You don't have to play into negative stereotypes just to convince people your rollout is popping. That's not a strategy. It's desperation. Doja has talent. Real talent. Same goes for a lot of other female rappers. They don't need to rely on chaos or gimmicks to sell. They aren't obsessed with competing against someone else's numbers or constantly proving a point. They just release their music, and if it does well, it's because the music connected with people, not because they staged some scandal to grab headlines. That's what I respect about Doja. She moves at her own pace. She's not scrambling to beat another artist's record. She's not trying to manufacture drama. She's just putting her art out there. And honestly, the comparisons people are trying to force on her are just unfair. Now let's move on to the next mess that's been boiling over on Twitter, the whole back and forth between Advocate BBL and JT. If you've been watching, you know this blew up fast. People were saying Advocate BBL was throwing shade at JT, hinting at stuff about JT's man and his orientation. And there were all these wild accusations flying around. From the jump, I said this whole story smelled off. There are claims that Advocate BBL is pregnant with someone who already has messy allegations attached to him. Not only questions about his orientation, but also serious accusations about pressuring others without consent. So when you put that all together, the whole situation becomes messy and hard to swallow. It didn't make sense to me, and I knew it wouldn't land cleanly with the public. What I didn't expect, though, was JT exploding the way she did during her promo week. That was the twist. Suddenly, JT was out here clapping back, reading Advocate BBL on stage, and people started celebrating her for it. A lot of fans loved seeing JT stand up and clap back, and I get that energy. It felt cathartic for many. But the timing is what really raises eyebrows. This whole JT moment happened around the exact same time people were calling out suspicious numbers and possible fraud. So the timing makes you wonder, are these incidents connected? I've seen a bunch of people on Twitter pointing out that this fight could be used as cover. The logic goes like this. If a public altercation spikes streams and sales, then you can claim the boost was organic, blame the drama for the numbers, and slide past the hard questions about whether those figures were manipulated. Honestly, I think there's a real chance some of this is staged. I'm not saying it definitely is, but the pattern is suspicious. Another thing people noticed, even though these two went at each other publicly, they're still following each other on social media. That detail alone makes some folks think they might be coordinating for attention. And remember this, JT is connected to Rock Nation. Rumors have been swirling that she's close to signing with them, and she was even seen at Rock Nation recently. When you start adding industry ties into the mix, the whole scenario starts to look less like a spontaneous fight and more like strategic positioning. So yeah, there's drama. There's accusation, and there's suspicious timing. But until more concrete facts come out, all we can do is watch how the numbers move and how the tour plays out. Because the real test of an artist's pull is what shows up in ticket sales and long-term streams. So honestly, this whole thing is starting to make me question what's really going on. Like, was this back and forth even real? Or was it staged? Because the way it played out feels messy, but also way too on brand for everyone involved. Here's what went down. The guy accusing Stefan Diggs of some pretty wild stuff sat down for an interview and spilled everything. And then, out of nowhere, JT just had to insert herself. Now, part of me feels like if this was staged, certain lines would have been off limits. But JT, she didn't hold back at all. She literally said, "This is bananas. Men should be protected." And she was responding to a tweet with a clip of Tasha K interviewing Chris Blake, the man making these claims. But it didn't stop there. JT went full Sagittarius mode and started tagging everybody. Like Patriots, CNN, Cardi B, Donald Trump, Chad Ochocinco, Atlantic Records, Polo G, Mexico. Yes, Mexico. I was crying when I saw it. Like, girl, what are you doing? Patriots probably sitting there confused, and Mexico's like, why are we in this? Honestly, it gave Nicki M-level energy, pure chaos. Then, to make things messier, Advocate BBL jumped into the mix, trying to give some type of response or defense. And at that point, it just felt like a circus. Everyone inserting themselves, everyone talking over the facts. It's a lot. So here's the part that had me shaking my head. JT wasn't done yet. She jumped on Snapchat and called out the hypocrisy, plain and simple. She said, "It's insane how just a couple months ago you were out here supporting abortion rights, but now your go-to insult is to shame someone for having one." Make it make sense, and honestly, she's right. Just from that alone, you can already see the difference in the way these two argue. JT comes off logical while the other side just sounds messy. If you value an actual conversation with reason behind it, JT clearly wins. But if you think yelling and throwing low blows counts as a good argument, well, you'd probably say she lost. Personally, I'm siding with JT because the contradictions are clown level. Like, how do you go from being all about choice over your body to suddenly using that same thing as an insult? Who even hangs around someone like that? What do they talk about? Because honestly, the lack of consistency is wild. And then JT kept going. Somebody asked, "Where's your response?" And she hit them back with, "Right here." Then she actually posted Advocate BBL's supposed attempt at a diss track toward her. And let me tell you, JT is a troll in the best way. She turned it into comedy. To top it off, someone else chimed in saying, "Girl, this is your man. You've got bigger problems to deal with," and then dropped pictures of Leslie. At that point, the whole thing turned from beef into straight-up reality TV energy. And then JT shut it all the way down. She said, "Yes, my man does this. He minds his business, works hard, takes care of his family, inspires his generation, and doesn't steal anyone's style. His originality is what made him Lil Uzi. But right now we're talking about Chris. Focus." She doubled down again, saying, "No, I want justice for Chris." And honestly, that line hit different because she was making it clear that this wasn't just internet drama. She was standing on principle. One fan even jumped in saying, "I hate how when men make allegations, they're never taken seriously. I'm glad you're speaking up." JT replied with, "Cardi B's baby father is a G, not because of how he dresses or expresses himself, but because Chris said it out of his mouth. Justice for Chris. I stand with the Gs." Now, while all this was going on, critics tried to drag her about her numbers. JT clapped back, "I don't care how much someone sells. I don't give an F if she sells 1,000,000 units. She'll always be a proud, non-rapping HB. She couldn't even find a word to rhyme with fake. We saw it with our own eyes." Of course, somebody came back at her like, "But weren't you smiling in her face and excited to have her on your song?" And JT, unbothered, admitted, "Well, yes," which honestly just made the whole thing funnier. Here's the bigger issue, though. This back and forth exposed something real. Because when advocate BBL tried to use abortions as an insult, JT pointed out the hypocrisy. And she's right. That's not activism, that's performative clout chasing. You can't preach about women's rights one month, then weaponize it against them the next. That's not being an ally. That's fake activism, plain and simple. And that's why this whole mess feels so exhausting. What does it even mean at the end of the day? Just another example of celebrities saying one thing for clicks and doing the opposite when it suits them. Honestly, it's a circus. Anyway, that's where I'll leave it for now. This story is wild, but trust me, there's more coming. Until the next one, I'll catch you later.